We're delighted to have Vijay Vazirani, distinguished professor from the University of California, Irvine, as a speaker today. He'll be talking on online bipartite matching and Adwords.
So, thank you all for coming, and thanks for this wonderful invitation. Okay, I have to hit got it, right? Okay. Yeah, we are all live and okay. So I'm going to talk about online bipartite matching first, and then jump into Adwords and tell you everything from scratch. So here's the problem. Oops. There we go. Yeah, good. So think of a bipartite graph on n goods and n buyers. There's an underlying graph, and the edges of the graph just represent the fact that these buyers like the goods. So it's not a complete graph. And the goods are sitting there offline, and the buyers arrive one at a time. And as soon as the buyer arrives, you know the edges incident at the buyer, which goods this buyer wants. And immediately you want to right away match this buyer to one of the goods that she wants. And it's irrevocable, this matching. And then another buyer comes and you match her, and another comes and both the edges go to already matched vertices, so you cannot match her. But that's because you made some errors before, right? If you had taken a different matching, you would have gotten a matching of size 3. So in some sense, it's your fault. And in some sense, it's not your fault because you didn't know what was coming. Because you have to make these decisions irrevocably right away based on partial information. So that's the whole game. How to make good decisions based on partial information, whatever you know. And you are guaranteed. So we'll do what's called competitive analysis. So we'll be getting a graph on n buyers and n goods, which already has a perfect matching, let's say, and that's without loss of generality. I'll show you why I say that. And even if it didn't have a perfect matching, the whole problem makes sense. And then we'll be measuring the competitive ratio of our algorithm, which is the size of the matching we found divided by n. And we want to this ratio, of course, to be as high as possible for our algorithm. So,
so just 1 second, I'll try to see if I can increase the mic volume.
Okay. I don't have a microphone.
The device already.
Oh, this catches. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So the instance, by the way, also includes the arrival order of the buyers. So look at the worst case graph, underlying graph, and arrival order, and we want to look at that competitive ratio like that. And another way to think about it is that there's an adversary that picks the graph and the arrival order. Okay. And it's very easy to see that the ratio will be at least half, because we are definitely going to match a vertex if it can be matched. So it's a greedy matching, and greedy is at least half the maximum matching. So we will get a ratio of at least a half, and the adversary can force us into a half by doing this. He gives us these two edges, and if we match up there, the next vertex comes like that. If we match down there, the next vertex comes like that, and we always get 1 for 2. Okay, so then to do better, we should be using randomization. The deterministic is stuck at a half. So then the definition of competitive analysis changes to the following, where we look at the expected size of the matching produced by our algorithm over the randomization that it uses, divided by n. And this time, the adversary picks the graph and the arrival order of the buyers. Then we flip coins, the algorithm flip coins. So the adversary knows the algorithm, but cannot see the coin flips, because if the adversary sees the coin flips, then it's as bad as deterministic, obviously. So then the algorithm flips coins and executes. Okay. So how are we going to use randomization? So an obvious way is that when a buyer comes, we look at all the available goods and match the buyer to a random one of them. if there's any available one. If none, then do nothing. So let's see how well this works. And unfortunately, it doesn't go much beyond half. Basically, it's stuck essentially at a half, plus a little of one. Why do I say that? So in this, this is the adjacency matrix of the graph that I'm going to, which is a bad graph for this algorithm. So the adjacency matrix has a matching or perfect matching on the diagonal, and then it has an n over 2 by n over 2 corner of ones, and I'll call that a trap. Okay, and the rest are all zeros. So and the goods are the rows of this graph, and the buyers come in that order, n through 1. That's the bad order. And what happens is that each time a buyer comes, you'll pick a random one in that column, and more likely than not, it will be forced into the trap because you have n over 2. In the beginning, you have n over 2 choices to get into the trap and one choice to go to the diagonal. But the diagonal is the good match here, because if you have k diagonal matches in the first n over 2 arrivals, then your size of the matching is n over 2 plus k. That's very easy to see. Okay, so the bigger k is, the better is your competitive ratio. But it turns out that k is order log n, and that's also very easy to show. And so we are stuck at n over 2 plus order log n. That's half plus little o of 1. So we didn't make any substantial progress. And these facts are all proven in a chapter of a book that's upcoming on matching markets, which is on my website. So if you have doubts about any of these claims, it's all available there. But I need to speed up, and there's a lot to be covered. So this failed, right? This way of randomization failed, and randomization, without randomization, we are stuck at a half. With this obvious method of randomization, we are still stuck at essentially a half. What do we do? Okay, so what we do is that we look at this, we study this bad example very, very carefully, and we have one more very nice heuristic, namely that the algorithm should be minimalistic.
Can it be adaptive randomization?
Adaptive,
Person comes in, he kind of knows how the coins will fit earlier.
No. But
That's implementable.
I'm sorry. You're asking if so the coins are flipped when the person comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, but the coins, the person has to,
Needs to have some probability distribution based upon what's happened already.
that also is fine. Yeah, that's also fine. Yeah, as you'll see very soon. So what we want is that the algorithm should be minimalistic. Okay, what do I mean by that? Very few lines, because if the algorithm is trying to deal with this example, that's not a good algorithm. Then there'll be some other example where the thing will fail, and it will be a big algorithm because it's. But you have a small algorithm, it's really dealing with everything. Okay, and the best algorithms are really minimalistic, and they should be normally 3 or 4 lines, but this is only 2 lines. Okay, namely, you pick a random order on the goods, randomly permute the goods once, not every time a buyer arrives, once only, because if you permute it every time the buyer arrives, then it goes back to the previous algorithm, then stuck at a half. Okay, and then at each time a buyer arrives, you match her to the highest available good in that randomly picked order. Okay, so let's see how this works, at least on this example. So you would expect so here the goods are permuted randomly, so the rows will be permuted randomly, and the columns are coming in that order. And so you would expect half of the bottom rows to go up and half of the top rows to come down. Not exactly, but approximately. Lots of them will go up and lots of them will come down. And so a typical column will look like this. It will have ones from the top, the red ones from the top, and the red zeros from the bottom. And there's at some point there'll be a black one, which is the diagonal one, which is the unique diagonal one for this column. and the column will just look down what it sees and picks the first available one, right? That's the algorithm. So if it picks the black one, that's a victory for us. But why should it pick a black one? Well, because all the previous rows also have the same ones in the row of ones is contiguous. So the previously occurring columns also will have this pattern other than the black one, right? So if a previous column picks one of these red ones, then it got a bad match, but every bad match early on improves the chance of our getting a good match now. Okay. And so if both these ones got picked early, then our column, our favorite column, this one, will get a good match, right? So the bad matches early on improve the chances of a good match later. So one word description of why this might be a good algorithm is that it is self-correcting. Previous errors only improve performance now. And in this example, of course, as I said, you would expect lots of the bottom rows to come up and lots of the top rows to go down. And typically, you know, the diagonal one will be higher up than before, and many of them will get matched. And the proof really lies in doing the whole proof for an arbitrary graph, which is what I'll show you next. Okay, so this algorithm is called ranking, and it was found in 1990 in pre-internet days, and all its applications happened after the internet. You'll see what they are, and it has a computative ratio of 1 minus 1 over e, and it's optimal. No online randomized algorithm can do better than this plus a little o of one term. I won't go into that upper bound proof, but I'll show you the lower bound, why this algorithm does at least 1 minus 1 over e. Okay. Yeah, by the way, if you have a question, please stop me right away, or even a comment or anything.
So when a new work is added, is it state of it is allowed to depend on the currently constructed matching, or
is it what?
so is the state when a new work is added, is the state of it is allowed to depend on the matching currently constructed?
No, of course not. The adversary has picked the graph early, and then the point flips are done, as I said earlier. So otherwise you're stuck at deterministic lower bound of half, upper bound of half. So so one problem with this result was that the proof was too involved and very hard to understand. I mean, it's very somehow okay, inflow. I mean, okay, whatever it was very difficult. But some people started understanding it at some points, and the first simplification was done by two of my students, Gagan Goyal and Avinash Mehta, many years after the 1990 result. And then more simplification was done by Claire Matthew and Winbaum, who was a student of Anna Carlin. And at this point, many people started understanding it. And then these people, Nikhil Devanur, Kamal Jain, and Bobby Kleinberg, they gave a very nice interpretation analysis using randomized primal dual. And this could already be taught essentially in a graduate course. And then Michal Feldman and her student Alon Eden, and then Emosiet and Sigal, they gave an economic interpretation and gave a different way of charging to buyers and goods whatever matching was being accrued. And this made it a very elegant analysis, very beautiful analysis. And I wrote it for that chapter that I mentioned. And once I wrote it, I felt like, okay, it's too simple to just let it be, and let's extend it. So I'll show you where that took me. Okay, and there's much more to the story, which I'll keep telling you slowly as we come to it. But the analysis I show you is essentially based on this, plus a little bit more. Okay, so here's a stating of the algorithm ranking. So every good J picks a random number Wj from the interval 0 to 1, from the continuous interval 0 to 1, and says that its price is e to the Wj minus 1. Okay, so so these prices range between 1 over e and 1, because when Wj is 0, you get 1, and when Wj is 1, you get 1 over e, right? So that's where the prices range from. But Wj is random, and this is, by the way, the best choice of best way of picking Pj to get the best factor. This has been proven not very difficult. So so now what happens? So as soon as the buyer comes, she looks at all the prices and picks the cheapest one. And this is the same as ranking the previous algorithm, because with probability 1, all the prices will be different. And so if you sort the goods by prices, you get a random order, obviously, right? So it's the same as ranking. And why are these called prices? Because think of it as if the buyer gets a utility of 1 from the good that she likes, but she really has to pay this price. Okay, so the net utility she gets is 1 minus the price that she paid. Okay, let's think of it like that. Okay, so now I'm going to define some random variables which are very straightforward here in this case. The first ones at least. So the utility of buyers, I almost said it. Basically, if okay, so I'll always index buyers by I and goods by j. And if I gets matched to j, then we accrued one edge into our matching. We'll divide that one between, we'll ascribe some of it to the buyer and some of it to the good. How much to the buyer? 1 minus the price, whatever the utility, net utility the buyer got. Think of this really as a price, and 1 is the utility, so that net utility is 1 minus pj. And let's say that pj will be the revenue of good j. So these are two random variables. Oh, I've defined now 3 random variables, pj, ui, and rj. Of course, if I remained unmatched, the utility is 0. If j remained unmatched, the revenue is 0. If j is matched, the revenue is pj. And if I got matched, then her utility is 1 minus pj, depending on where she got matched, right? So very straightforward 3 random variables. And because every matched edge which contributes 1 really to the matching has been, that 1 has been split among the good and the buyer in this fashion. So the expected size of the matching is the sum of the expectations of the utilities and the sum of the expectations of the revenues. That's straightforward, okay, because we divided it like that. And now the central lemma that we'll prove is that for every matched edge, no matter which matched edge we look at in the graph, it has to be a matched edge, not an unmatched edge. Every matched edge ij, the sum of the utility of that buyer and the revenue of that good, the expectation of that is at least 1 minus 1 over e. Okay, for every matched edge. And I'm not talking about, I mean, so this edge has that expectation, this has, but there's no independence that I'm claiming among these edges. It's not that they simultaneously have that much expectation. That's the expectation of each edge. Okay. Got it? Okay. So I claim that once we prove this, which is coming up in the next few slides, that's the crux of the matter. Okay. Then the bound will follow very easily. And let's just complete that part because it's just 2 more lines. So then we can get that the competitive ratio of ranking is indeed 1 minus 1 over e. Why? Because this is just, I'm carrying over the last claim that the expectation of the matching produced with some of the expectations of the revenues and the expectations of the utilities. And now we'll align i's and j's along a perfect matching in the graph, because we know there is one. And by the linearity of expectation, that ui and rj is the expectation of ui plus rj, and that's at least 1 minus 1 over e for each edge ij, and these are all independent edges. They don't share a good or a buyer. So we get n times 1 minus 1 over e. And if you didn't have a perfect matching, if the size of maximum matching was k, you'd get k times 1 minus 1 over e, but just looking at some k edges of the maximum matching. So really, you can see that the crux of the matter is that lemma.
This is all optimized,
Everything is optimized, yeah, because
prices you kept between 1 and 1.
sorry,
You kept everything between 1 and 1 minus 1 by e.
yeah,
That shows it.
it's completely optimized. Question? What is the question?
So, Rahul, can you speak out?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So in the lemma, it says corresponding to each edge.
Yeah.
While in the summation, they're along a particular matching which the optimal offline algorithm can do. So
Right.
how does one see the distinction?
So it applies to those edges also, because this claim is for every edge, including we don't know which edges will be matched by the optimal perfect matching. So if we show it this lemma for every edge, and then we just take the edges of the perfect matching, and then we just look at the random variables corresponding to that those edges.
All right.
Okay. Right. So I'm left with proving the lemma, right? Okay, so let's go to the lemma. Now, for this, I have to talk about several different runs of the algorithm. What do I mean by runs of the algorithm? Okay, so for every good j, let gj be the graph where I remove this good j. Okay. Now, of course, in these runs of this algorithm, which I will define in a moment, the random bits are flipped only once, and you know all the pjs. Okay. And now you define all these runs. So R is the run on the original graph itself. Then for every good j, Rj is the run on Gj after you have removed j. So you run the whole thing again after removing j. Okay, so whatever, got it? Okay, so j never participates in the run Rj. Okay. So is this clear cut? I mean,
So ranking is the same, and everyone comes in and picks the least.
right? Yeah, you take the prices, the fees as they were, as they are done by these random bits, and the prices are fixed once and for all after using the randomization in the way I said, and then you execute these runs, all these runs. So there are n runs here and one more run here. And if you want any of these definitions to be written on the board, I'll be happy to. But if you're up with it, you want? No. Okay. So, but maybe as the next definition I'll write, because it is a little bit of a curved ball. Maybe like a cricket ball, except in cricket it doesn't. Oh, maybe even in cricket it curves in the air, right? Sometimes. So this is going to curve in the air a little bit. So here is this new definition. So for every edge ij, which I'm calling edge ij as e, I'll define a random variable which is called a threshold random variable, ue. What is it? It is the utility that I gets in the run rj after you remove j. Okay. So ue equal to utility of I in the run rj. And I'll be talking about this random variable for the next 10 minutes. Okay. Really central to the proof of that lemma. And the critical fact to note is that this random variable is independent of the random variable pj. Why? Because ue got determined in a graph that didn't even have j. So it's as if you determine ue without the j, and then you flip the coins for j and you determine pj. And you can do that for every j. Okay, as if they're all, ue is always independent of pj. And this this independence is absolutely critical. This is the most slippery part of the proof, and I've done proofs where I was trying to oversimplify, and it was failing right here where independence was not holding. And so I'm going to do conditional expectation arguments, and there this kind of independence is actually the key thing. You have to make sure it holds, otherwise the whole thing falls flat. Sooner or later, you even get a counterexample.
Sir, I might not get matched.
Sorry?
I might not get matched in T minus data.
I didn't say it is matched.
What is the utility of UE for me?
Utility of I might be 0.
Oh,
I didn't say it is a positive utility. Okay, so
UV is if R was the complete set, utility would be higher. And because you've taken one node out,
Good.
lower, and
good,
it's function of PJ also, and PJ is
good,
directionally.
good. We are going to use this fact very soon in a moment. Okay, so this is what we have to show, that the total for every ij, the total utility of for every edge ij, not just non-edge, every edge ij, the utility of the buyer I plus the revenue of the good j, the sum of their expectations is at least 1 minus 1 over e. Okay, and you just said the fact that ui is at least ue because I has more options in the run R than in RJ. So if it has more options, it's going to might be able to pick a lower price and therefore get a higher utility. Okay, and because of that, utility of these two is bigger than the utility of these two. So I don't have to talk about UI anymore. It's more convenient to talk about UE. So I'm going to show you this fact, which of course leads to the other fact. Okay, so I'm going to show you that the expected utility of UE plus the RJ is at least 1 minus 1 over e, and that gives the top fact, obviously. Okay, and how are we going to show this? So basically, we have to show that the sum of these two quantities is at least 1 minus 1 over e. So it's like a trade-off argument. If UE is already large, like essentially 1 minus 1 over e, there's not much to prove. There's very little more to go. But if UE is small, then we must show that RJ is large. That's what is the crux of the matter here. If UE is small, if the utility gained by I in this run RJ is small, then the revenue of good J must be sufficiently large that the sum still turns out to be 1 minus 1 over e in expectation. Okay, so let's see when is it that good J accrues revenue. It accrues revenue if it got matched, obviously. If it never got matched, it accrues 0 revenue. So when does it get matched? So claim is that if 1 minus Pj is bigger than UE, then J will definitely be matched in the run R. So if without J, you got utility UE, and if the price of J is sufficiently small in that particular randomization, so that the utility 1 minus Pj is bigger than the utility that I got in this run Rj, then J will definitely be matched. And straightforward, simple fact, because if J is not already, so look at the run R. Okay, these buyers are arriving one at a time, and suppose when I arrives, J is already matched, then there's nothing to prove. If I arrives and J is not matched, then J is giving a better utility to I than the other goods that were available in GJ. And so therefore, J will be the maximal utility good for I, right? Is that a reasonable statement? I mean, you agree with that, right? Everybody agrees with that? Okay. So let me just show you pictorially what I want to do. So as I said, if UE is small, if the utility accrued by I is small, then 1 minus UE is large, and over a large range, of values for Pj, J will be matched and will accrue revenue, right? That's what we want to show, that if UE is small, then RJ is large. RJ is large because over a large range of PJs, revenue will be accrued, okay? And namely, whenever Pj is in this range, 1 over e to 1 minus UE. And this fact also justifies the name threshold for this random variable, because 1 minus UE is as if a threshold under which J is always matched. If Pj is more than 1 minus UE, maybe it's matched, maybe it's not, but we'll not even count that towards our benefit. Okay, we only count the definite benefit. So so intuitively this is what we want to do, but at the end of the day, the numbers have to work out. So let's see why the numbers should work out. So we are looking at this function this is the function e to the x minus 1, and x is of course between 0 and 1. When we pick a random price, we pick an x at random from 0 to 1 and apply this function to x. That's how we get Pj in the first place. Okay, and now we want to say that no matter where UE lies, the sum of UE and RJ is large. So let's condition on UE being Z, where Z is in the correct range. The correct range happens to be 0 to 1 minus 1 over e. So let's condition on the entire run on this condition that UE happen to be Z. Okay, this random variable UE happen to be Z. And of course, if Z is large, there's not much work to be done. But if Z is small, then we have to do a lot of work to show that lots of revenue got accrued. Okay, and by conditioning on Z, we are basically counting all possibilities. We are dealing with all possibilities. Okay, so now just pick a W so that e to the W minus 1 is 1 minus Z. So I'm just taking that W, and e to the W minus 1 is 1 minus Z, and whenever Pj is in this range between 0 and 1 minus Z, revenue is accrued. J is matched, revenue is accrued. How much revenue is accrued? Whatever Pj happens to be, which is this amount for each value of x. For x, it is e to the x minus 1. So over this entire range, so whenever I pick x in this range 0 to W, I'm going to get revenue, and the revenue will be e to the x minus 1. So the total revenue accrued is basically the integral of this curve, which is the area under this part, in the green part. And that's a lower bound of the revenue, because whenever x is picked outside this interval, then also maybe we get revenue, but I'm not even counting that. Okay, so that's good. That's that area is a lower bound on the revenue, but how much is it in terms of quantities? I mean, how much is it? So let's just do this integral. We just want to compute this integral of e to the x minus 1 for x going from 0 to W, and see what it looks like, because that's the conditional expectation of revenue given that UE equal to Z. And there it is. The conditional expectation of revenue given that UE equal to Z is at least that integral of e to the x minus 1, where x goes from 0 to W, and simple high school math will show you that it's 1 minus 1 over e minus Z. Okay, but that's the conditional expectation of the revenue. What is the revenue itself? That can be lower bounded by using the law of total expectation, and you know what that is, right? That's elementary undergrad probability. So the expectation of Rj is the expectation of the conditional expectation. The conditional expectation is lower bounded by this, and the expectation itself will be the integral of Z going from 0 to 1 minus 1 over e, which is the range of Z. of the conditional expectation times the probability density function of UE, which we don't know what it is, but it will factor out right away. We don't even care for it. It's a symbol that will drop out, because once we do this, once we plug in this lower bound here and do the integration, it's 1 minus 1 over E minus the expectation of UE. And if we take the expectation of UE on the other side, we get that the expectation of UE plus RJ is 1 minus 1 over E. So for every edge, IJ, UI plus RJ is at least 1 minus 1 over E. QED. Yes, sir. Right here. Right here. This conditional expectation, I'm having picked UE equal to Z, what values of RJ, PJ are there for which J is matched. That is obtained by just flipping coins for J right now. And the reason I can flip coins for J right now is because PJ is independent of UE. And so this integral happens because of that independence. And the rest is just law of total expectation and some linearity of expectation. That's all. It was a good question, though. And any other questions? Okay, so we are done, and it didn't take long, right? But we had to wait for 31 years, so it did take long, right? So I just want to make one remark here that so what I got here is really that expectation of UI plus RJ is at least 1 minus 1 over E for every edge IJ. So that's not saying that this is how much chances there are that I will get matched to J. No, this expectation is the total amount accrued when I gets matched to all possible J's and J gets matched to all possible I's, as it should be, right? Okay, just one has to make sure that you make that distinction in your mind, otherwise.
This is the simplest group that you have right now.
Yeah, I think so. For my taste, and the proof of the pudding is that it goes forward to more general problems. Whereas to take other proofs forward, I don't know, nobody has done it anyway. Well, that's not also true. It goes one step forward, but not as far as this goes. This goes very easily forward, that one step also, but more steps also. Okay. I mean, so somebody may say, no, I like this other proof. So what? I mean, that's up to you, right? It's a matter of taste at that point. But for my taste, this is the simplest, and it went the furthest so far. So I made two intuitive statements, and I have to give proof for that. Otherwise, the proof is not complete. And it turns out that those intuitive statements, even though they are true, those proofs were not given in by the previous papers. Okay. In particular, this fact, which everybody nodded their head and said it's obvious, it's not at all obvious. That if J is not already matched when I arrive, then J is the maximum utility good for I. Well, J is the maximum utility good for I in the run Pj, in which J is not even present. But once J, oops, what happened here? Okay, no, thanks, thank God. So, but when J is present, we don't know how the matching changes. And we don't know that some J prime doesn't emerge, which gives I a bigger utility than J, and therefore J remains unmatched. So we got a better matching by matching I to J prime, but the statement that J is matched definitely at that point is not true. So we don't know have a lower bound on the revenue accrued at J. Okay, and it turns out that that needs another property to be proven, and I call it the no surpassing property. That if J is better than I in Rj, then it is not surpassed in R. No J prime comes and surpasses it. So whereas this is obvious here, it of course needs a proof which was not present in the previous proofs given for ranking, and now it's proven. But I'm stressing it because it's even obvious that it works. I mean, it's not hard to prove it, but of all the ideas, of which I think the most difficult ones are the probabilistic ones, and this is a small combinatorics. When you'll see in a moment that when we try to go forward, all the heavy ideas generalize, and this fact, this no surpassing property, doesn't generalize, and that's why the most beautiful result that should be obtained from this way of thinking is not obtainable, at least as yet. And I'll leave it as an open problem in my paper. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Okay. Unless there are questions now, I'll proceed forward to those other more general problems. But I'm going to change gears before I can even talk about those general problems. How much time? We have plenty of time, right? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. So I'm going to talk about matching markets, and there they are. And you'll soon see what I mean by matching market. And I start telling you what they are all about. But this is a mess right now. Too many, and they are from all walks of life. So let's classify them. And these are the pre-internet ones where you match. In the medical world, you match residents to hospitals. Then after they graduate, they have to do a residency. You have to match them to hospitals, and there's a matching that goes on, and that uses Gale-Shapley stable matching algorithm. You match students to schools, and like in large cities, like in New York City, you have 1 million. You have 100,000 students and 100 schools, and you have to do it through a computer. You cannot do it per student basis. And so you have to collect data from the students and find the right match. And that's all done using Gale-Shapley algorithm. And you have to do kidney exchange, and I'll describe that later. But so these are the pre-internet markets, and this is where the field of matching-based market design already became very, very famous and influential, because these are big applications with sociological impact in particular. And then came the internet, and we got the Adwords market. I'll describe that fully. Upwork, which matches that you have employers and workers coming online, and you have to match them so that this employer gets the worker that can actually do the job. Display ads is like Adwords, and we'll come to that also. The Mechanical Turk is like Upwork, and you know what Match.com is. I don't. All the young people know what Match.com is. Okay, and then the mobile computing came, and you have to match riders to cars, and ride sharing is where two riders come at a close by place in close by time, and you want to put them into the same car so they pay less. Airbnb is where you
In
match.
all these applications, you have a little bit of time to kind of catch up a few things.
Sometimes you have, like in ride sharing, and you have to use the time because it's not instantaneous.
But I'm thinking, is that, I mean, can you do analysis to say that if you're going to do batching, what's the right batch?
There's lots of work like that, yeah. So many, aspects, yeah. Whenever something changes, that gives you opportunity to do.
As kind of nice looking as you have right now.
Sorry?
As elegant as what you have right now.
Oh, no, of course, that goes away, yeah. That elegance goes away. So there are all these magic markets, and there's one more that I haven't put in my list here, but it's of incredible importance to everybody here. You know what that is? Here, this one. Academic journal. And why is it not in the previous list? Because in academia, every hire is a one-off. Okay, and so you cannot automate that. Be a fiasco if you automate it. And as such, the market is very ill-behaved for that reason. anyway, okay. So in what sense are these markets, you can ask? So this is a quote from Alroth. He says that matching markets are markets because they aggregate information that is held by participants, which is what markets do. Your traditional markets do that also, right? When how is the price of onion and bananas and petrol determined? So it's based on supply and demand, which is based on your information that you have in mind, how much money you can spend, what you want, and so on and so forth. And the market is just aggregating all that information. So this field was has received a Nobel Prize for this work. Lloyd Shapley, who's the author of the first paper that started this field with Gail Shapley, and Al Roth, who has also done very influential work on school choice and kidney exchange and so on. And last year, Paul Milgrom got a Nobel for another purpose, another work, spectrum options. But one of his very influential works, which is given in that citation, is on matching markets. So it has been celebrated within economics, this matching-based market design. The fantastic thing for us as computer scientists and as algorithms people is that this field is connected to algorithm design right from birth. Because if you look at the Gale-Shapley algorithm for stable matching, they gave this deferred acceptance algorithm, which works in polynomial time. And at that point, polynomial time wasn't even defined. The definition came in 1965 Edmonds. But if you look at all the various mechanisms that have come out from economics and game theory, most of them don't have good algorithmic properties like Nash equilibrium and market equilibrium and so on. We are realizing more and more of that as we give intractability proofs. But this one does. And so this was, because it is polynomial time, it had applications right away in the computational sense, rather than just as a high level sort of conceptual understanding of issues without implementation, because the implementations will not halt in the next million years for any reasonable size of n. But this polynomial time, you have good implementations. Okay, so it's in P, and it has many, many properties. A lot of incredible structure, very clean structure, which gives rise to many more algorithmic results. So, for instance, if you take the set S of all stable matchings and impose a certain partial order, which I will not define, then you get that under this partial order, S is a finite distributive lattice, which means that it has a top element and a bottom element. And in the case of the resident market, one can say that one of these can be said to be the resident optimal matching, and the other the hospital optimal matching. So this matching favors the residents, this the hospitals, and you know these things right from undergraduate classes on stable matching. And this you may or may not know, but there's a fantastic theorem of Birkhoff going even before 1962. Garrett Birkhoff, he was a professor at Harvard, and Birkhoff's representation theorem applies to any finite distributive lattice. And through his theorem, you get that there's a notion of rotation which helps you traverse this lattice. So in going from one stable matching to another, you apply a certain rotation. Okay, and the set of all rotation, you need only n square rotations at most to get this representation. The representation is very succinct, even though the lattice may be exponentially large. And using these rotations and this partial order that's defined here, you can traverse this lattice from the top to the bottom or anywhere to anywhere. Everything is polynomial time. Okay. And then Birkhoff, this very same Birkhoff, because he also had a father who was George Birkhoff, who did other mathematics. But Garrett Birkhoff also gave the Birkhoff polytope, right, for bipartite perfect matchings. And similar to the Birkhoff polytope, there's also a stable matching polytope, the convex hull of all stable matchings. And with that, you have LP formulations, which also give you another way of finding stable matchings by solving linear programs. So much polynomial time is happening here because of the very, very nice combinatorial structure. And as far as I'm concerned, all of that happens because this problem comes from this gold mine. Right? Okay, so, and then on top of that, in addition to the algorithmic properties, it also has incentive compatibility for the proposing side. And that opens up the whole thing to so many applications, school choice and residents in hospitals being two of them. Okay, then another problem that comes from that same gold mine is the maximum matching problem, which has applications to kidney exchange. If somebody so you have two kidneys basically, but you can live on one. And if both your kidneys are not functioning, then you're in deep trouble. So you need one kidney at least. Okay. So what you can do is go beg somebody, all kinds of people, and ask them to donate a kidney, which involves an operation on their side and operation on the side of the person who is getting the kidney. But this donor and the recipient, their kidneys may not match. There are many parameters to be matched. So if it doesn't match, then so say this donor and this recipient, their kidneys don't match, then they have to find another pair of donor and recipient who also don't match, but this donor can give to this recipient and this donor can give to this recipient. Okay, so this cross exchange can happen then, because then you can look at many pairs and pick out the right pair, so that both these exchanges happen, and then these two are very happy. Of course, they lost a kidney each, but they can live on one of their original kidneys. Unless that also fails, then you get back into the line. So, but the point here is that this involves 4 operations, okay, and they are almost always done simultaneously in the same hospital in 4 operation theaters, because say this donor gave to this recipient today, then tomorrow this donor can say, hey, I'm not giving my kidney, and you cannot force anybody to give their organ. This is not ethical. It's not done, basically. There are laws against it. So you have
the largest size of operation done so far.
It was 63 kidneys.
simultaneously.
Not in this way. So there were, I think, 63 or 48 or something, very large number, and it was the New York Times. So they had so many people, these pairs all ready for kidney exchanges. And sometimes what happens is that cadavers, when somebody dies, they can also get a kidney out of that if it's done really fast. And that's like an extra kidney. And it turned out that there were some very difficult recipients who were difficult to match. And so they were waiting for a long time. And then there came a very good kidney that was matchable with many people. And so that went to this recipient, and this went to this, and this went to this, and this went to this, and this. And of course, those 48 or 63 operations were not, and times 2 operations were not done at the same time. They were carrying the extra kidney from one city to another by plane and so on. So it's a major, it's basically saved people's lives. Okay, but this itself, this problem, what does it remind you of? So what you should do is create this graph where you have a node for every donor recipient pair who are really are not compatible, and put an edge between 2 such pairs if you can do that cross exchange. And then you want to find a maximum matching, right? And that will give you the largest number of these foursomes that can be done. And that's how it's done. Oh, sorry. Okay, so what I want to say is, and this is really the bottom line of this talk, is that in the first life of matching markets, which is pre-internet, these two problems from matching theory were the key: stable matching and maximum matching. In the new life, it has been rather online bipartite matching and its many generalizations. That forms the algorithmic backbone. And let me show you why. So, Adwords is a direct generalization of online bipartite. I'm going to define it, you'll see that. Display ads is where you have weights on edges. So the buyer comes and has a weight on so the doesn't only have edges, but has weights on these edges. And at the end of the day, you want to maximize the total weight of the matching accrued. And of course, if you match this to this good today and you say, oh, weight 2, very nice. But another buyer comes that could be weight 100, and you lost that opportunity. So anyway, so there are lots of issues here. And really display ads is okay. So another sort of product in advertising, internet advertising. Uber is where riders and cars are coming online. Both sides are. So in other words, buyers and goods are both coming online. That has also been attacked and studied by algorithms people. Ride sharing is where two riders come and have to match to each other. So that's non-bipartite matching. That also where they are arriving online. That also has been studied and algorithms have been developed. So basically, all of these, so many of these markets work on online bipartite matching and its generalizations. So I'm going to talk about Adwords next for the 15 minutes more that I have. And that is used in the Adwords marketplace of Google. I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but here's what it looks like. So when somebody types a keyword like Vioxx, or I don't know what you search for in Google, you might search for books or songs or CDs or pizza or food, or, right? You get some search results that are relevant to this keyword, and you also get ads. And why are there? Where did these ads come from? Basically, when you're typing something there to look for Vioxx, something related to Vioxx, Google knows that you are thinking about Vioxx, okay? And you probably you want to either buy some Vioxx is a drug, so maybe you want to buy more Vioxx or something related to Vioxx, or if you type pepperoni pizza, then you want to of course buy pepperoni pizza. And the corner pizza store, if they show their ad here, you're likely to click there or yeah, things like that. Or if you want to buy sneakers of a certain kind, and you say, fancy sneakers, and you see a shop there that's selling fancy sneakers, you click there. And when you click there, whatever they have bid to be here, it could be 50 cents, or in rupees, it could be 100 rupees, 500 rupees, okay. That, let's just say for simplicity, that amount of money goes from that advertiser's account to Google's account, okay. And you can say, hey, 5 cents here, 10 cents there, how much is it going to add up to? Let me show you how much it adds up to. So this way of advertising really changed advertising, the nature of advertising, because before that, you either had these billboards that were showing the car to millions of people, and maybe 100 people or 1,000 people bought that car, but it's a big waste. Here you have highly targeted advertising for the reasons that I just said. And Google, which went public in 2004, had a market valuation of 23 billion. Today is something like this. Okay, it's Indian economy is what, 3 trillion or 4. It wants to be 5 trillion in a few years. But Google's own market valuation is about 2 trillion. It's just astronomical, right? And most of it is because of the AdWords market. That's where they get that's the cash cow. But all of that money doesn't only go to help you if you, in case you invested in Google and makes your money grow, but it also pays for all the free goods that we got out of Google, right? The search, the email, the YouTube, the directions when you put in your, you use Google Maps and you use apps, and I mean, it goes on and on and on. Your digital world is dominated by Google, and that's all supported. The underlying costs are all paid by, or a very large fraction is paid by this AdWords market. Okay, so it's really, and it's a matching market, right? You have to match keywords to advertisers. How do you match that? That's the question that arises. And the way you should match them is that you should maximize Google's revenue. You should give the the keyword to the advertiser who's going to pay the most for it. Why? Because that's an indication that advertiser is going to use it to the maximum. So it's going to do the maximum good for the economy. And so it's called an efficient solution in economics. Okay. And so that means that we should use the greedy algorithm, always give it to the highest bidder. Okay, and that was being done for several years, a couple of years by Google. Okay, and by the way, if you see whose ads are being shown here for Vioxx, that's a lawyer, that's a lawyer, that's a lawyer, that's a lawyer, that's a lawyer. Why are there so many lawyers here? No drug companies or shops selling Vioxx, rather lawyers. Because Vioxx had caused heart problems among people who were taking Vioxx. And of course, these lawyers would like to extract some money from that patient before they die. Okay, so they want to start suing the Vioxx and extract some money from them. And the lawyers can pay up to somewhere or $50 to be here. It doesn't matter. You click here, $50 goes from the lawyer, but they'll make $1 million from the lawsuit. But a drug company can only pay 20 cents to be there. So the highest ever bidder is up there. That's the lawyers. Okay, so and this solution was being used, but there's a big problem here, and that is that when you go out and set up your keywords that you're interested in, you also declare a daily budget because you don't want to be flooded with queries and go bankrupt in a day. And that changes the whole equation, because now if you just still do greedy, you'll be back to factor half in the worst case. So you have to take into consideration budgets. And this is the problem that we got. Aranek Mehta, Amin Saveri, they were my students at Georgia Tech, and Umesh Vazirani and me. And in particular, Aranek Mehta is at Google now. And our first job was to get a simple framework that captures the essential features of this problem so that we could attack it mathematically. And I'll show you how we defined it as the AdWords problem. We called it the AdWords problem. And we were sure, I mean, we already knew at that point that the solution had to be very simple. So we couldn't go out and solve a big LP because that would be time consuming. And you know how fast the Google search results come in milliseconds. The ads also have to come out in milliseconds. Otherwise, you cannot wait for the ad to come tomorrow, right? Okay, so it is very important to deal with budgets because the distribution of budgets has a very fat tail. The small advertisers, the small budget advertisers are an overwhelming number who are responsible for a very large fraction of Google's revenues. So you have to take care of budgets carefully. So this is the AdWords problem. Each advertiser has a daily budget BJ, and for each query has a bid IJ. This is the abstract problem. Okay, there's an underlying graph where the edge just says that this advertiser is interested in this query. The query could be pepperoni pizza, or it could be samosas, Okay, and the same person is selling pizza and samosa, and another person is selling pizza and chole bhature. So the keywords could be those. Okay, so everybody has a subset of keywords that they and the bids could be different for each keyword. For pizza, it could be different than samosas. Okay, okay, and so the advertiser makes a bid, and the question is, what will Google choose as the advertiser that will be shown this query, and how much money will be transferred from here to here, right? Let's say that the money transferred from this advertiser to Google is just going to be the bid that they made, just for simplicity. Otherwise, it get impossible to deal with mathematically. But which advertiser will be given this query? Whose ad will be shown along with this query? That's the question to be answered. And here's the algorithm for a simpler problem, much simpler problem, which is the online B matching problem, which is like online matching, except that each advertiser can be matched to B different queries, where B is a very large number. So this is like the AdWords problem with 0-1 bids and very, very large budgets. And Kalyan Sundaram and Cruz had given a deterministic algorithm for this, whose competitive ratio is basically 1 minus 1 over E when B tends to infinity. So it's large bids, large budgets, small bids, 0-1 bids. And the algorithm is balanced, which says that once a query comes, you look at all the advertisers who want it and give it to the advertiser who has spent the least so far, so that the spending goes in lockstep, is as balanced as possible. That's what is made balanced. And we basically built on this idea to give a slightly a more general algorithm for the general AdWords problem, where we give the query to that bidder that maximizes bid times function f applied to the fraction of the budget spend, where f is this function, 1 minus e to the minus 1 minus alpha, but that goes down like this. So this function is large before upfront, and as the budget gets exhausted, the function has a smaller value, because you don't want to give this query to that advertiser who has spent a lot. You'd rather give it to somebody who has spent less, just like balance. Okay, and this algorithm has a competitive ratio of 1 minus 1 over E, provided bids are small compared to budgets in this case. Otherwise, all bets are off. But as you can see, so this one is optimal again, and it's minimalistic. It is what was needed. It's minimalistic in terms of computational power, memory, communication, everything. And for this reason, it had a huge impact, and many papers were built on online bipartite matching and this AdWords. And the reason was that the sponsored search engine companies, they have had and still have very deep pockets. So they went out and explored this area completely, as much as possible. That's why there are online bipartite matching, the generalizations of online bipartite matching have all been solved, these various ones that I mentioned. And then basically, once I saw this very simple analysis of ranking, I said, why not extend that to the small bids case? In 2005, we first tried to extend ranking, but couldn't. But now with a simpler analysis, maybe you can extend ranking all the way to the small bids case. And this is as far as I could go. I don't know, I have like 2 minutes left of talk. So I call it single valued because each advertiser has only one denomination of bids, not based on the query, but some BJ, some number BJ. And this advertiser can make only KJ queries, and this KJ and BJ are given as a part of the instance. And for this problem, if the effective bid of J for I is defined to be Bj times 1 minus Pj. Again, Pj's are flipped at random. And I is matched to J if, and I will pick that bid, effective bid, which is the largest. So although the bid may be small, maybe 1 minus Pj is very large. So which one wins depends on not only on the bid, but also on Pj, and Pj is a randomly flipped. So basically it does the job of balancing. Okay, and this turns out to be 1 minus 1 over E. Basically, what I said about edges for each edge ij ui plus rj is at least 1 minus 1 over E has to be said about what I call j stars, which is j together with k edges. For every possible j star, I can prove this kind of a statement. It's similar to that main lemma for online bipartite matching. And once this is done, you can get a bound of 1 minus 1 over E for this against the optimal way of doing this allocation. Okay, but the next step, going from here to small or to general, the thing that failed is the no surpassing property. Okay, so the thing that was even ignored earlier and nobody even thought about that hole in that argument, the hole had to be covered, of course, to get a complete proof. But that was not a big deal because it was an easy way to cover it. That happens to be the limiting issue. And all the other math with all the heavy probability goes through. So that's where things are stuck. And it is important to solve this problem because this way of doing things gives you a much simpler algorithm for the small bits case, which is budget oblivious. So the effective bid doesn't depend on the budget. And because it's budget oblivious, you can use it on platforms that are auto bidding platforms, where you have platforms where somebody's advertising campaign is spread over many search engines. And then the bids and budgets are altered dynamically. So all of that can be done if you solve this problem. And so there's a paper online and on my website which has all the details of how far it got and what is missing. So there's one big open problem, and then of course any other big things that will come up will be after you figure out the next nice thing to do in life. Okay, thank you.
Maybe we take the question offline. Okay, and then online.
Yeah, offline is since we did enough online.
Ask my question also.
No. No, those questions, I think Rahul's question was the only question there, which was answered. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so.
Are there any questions?
Yeah. So this ranking algorithm can this be extended to tripartite and all that? Three color.
How do you mean three colorable? So
I mean, it's like so there is.
So you have goods. So you have a bunch of shoes and a bunch of socks.
Yeah, maybe.
And agents come, and each agent has to be matched to a pair of shoes and a pair of socks. That kind of thing.
And there is an age between this.
Right. No, I got that. Yeah, interesting. I haven't. It won't be easy. Probably, my guess is no. But
because I mean, if we buy a shoe, maybe we can get a socks free. But if we buy a socks, maybe the shoes not. So
right, but you also need to have complementarities. So this pair of shoes only can be make sense to this agent provided you get this pair of socks.
Yeah.
And that could, if you don't have that, then you just solve two online matching problems. One with buyers and shoes and one with buyers and socks. But if you have complementarities, I think that would be incredibly difficult. But you're welcome to take a stab at it. It sounds like a very nice natural problem. Maybe it works out. Is even a half possible? I don't know. When you have complementarities, when there is you want there are correlations between the shoes and the socks in the person's mind. Then it's Yeah, a very, very interesting problem. Yeah, good. So I have, so at this point, it doesn't make sense to, so it makes sense to think about a market where you have cardinal utilities for these objects. And I have a paper on my website which talks about Nash bargaining based models. And one of the models is indeed this, where you have agents and two different kinds of goods. And there are utility functions that are joint between the two goods, not separable. And how do you model it as a Nash bargaining problem? But I never thought about it in the online setting. I don't even know how much you can do. I mean, I don't think you can model the cardinal utility functions here. But even without that, it probably might make some sense. But it's a very nice question to look into. Yeah, thank you.
There's a question.
Can you click on the chat? Piyush sends a question, which is, so you have to use your.
Sorry, my audio might be off.
So if you click on the chat, you will see this question.
Okay.
No.
Here. Do we expect that in the AdWords problem, the number of ad spots is much larger than the number of advertisers, so that the graph is very unbalanced? Ad spots is very few, advertisers is too many. So it doesn't make sense.
No, but sorry, let me try. I don't understand that because there's so many users. Each user is searching for so many things. Each one of those counts as a spot, right?
No. Each user, their query counts once, and you show maybe 5 ads to this user. Then the next user comes and you show 5 other ads. What you show to one user has nothing to do with what you show to the other user.
But the budget is over all these. Like the budget
Everybody, yeah, the budget is spread over the whole day for each advertiser.
It's like over several instances of the problem. Then
Sorry?
Its budget is over several instances of the problem.
No, it's over the entire execution over the whole day. So different queries come over the whole day, and the budget is spread over the whole day. Let's talk about it offline. I think we did enough online. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There is, let's thank the speaker. Balloon's talk starts at 5:30, but the speaker's favorites are there in our what's the